The rain hammered against the cabin windows like 1,000 desperate fists, each drop a reminder of another day gone by without answers. I sat in my worn leather chair, the same one I'd bought 40 years ago when Margaret and I first moved to this place on Vancouver Island. The whiskey in my glass had gone warm, untouched for the better part of an hour. Outside, the storm tore through the Douglas firs, their branches groaning under the weight of wind and water. Inside, I felt that same weight pressing down on my chest, the weight of 4 years without my son. 4 years. 1,461 days since Michael disappeared on that goddamn ski trip to Whistler. 1,461 days of wondering if he'd suffered, if he'd called out for me, if he'd thought about Sophie in those final moments. The RCMP had searched for months. They'd found his ski pole lodged in a crevasse, his goggles half buried in snow near Blackcomb Mountain. But no body, never a body. After 2 years, they'd declared him legally dead. I'd fought it. Spent what was left of my teacher's pension on lawyers, on private investigators who promised leads that went nowhere. But in the end, the law doesn't care about a father's instinct. The law cares about paperwork and timelines and moving on. Claire had moved on quickly enough. Too quickly, if you asked me, but nobody did. 6 months after the declaration, she'd remarried. Some slick investment banker named Victor Chen she'd met through her work at the tech company Michael had founded. They'd sold the house in Kitsilano, the one Michael had been so proud of, with its view of the mountains and English Bay. Sophie, my 8-year-old granddaughter, barely remembered her father now. Claire made sure of that, keeping her away from me with excuses about school and activities and how my obsession wasn't healthy for a growing child. I took a sip of the whiskey, finally. Let it burn down my throat. Maybe Claire was right. Maybe I was just a bitter old man who couldn't accept that sometimes the mountains take people and don't give them back. Margaret would have told me to let it go. She'd have put her hand on my shoulder, the way she always did, and reminded me that holding on to pain doesn't honor the dead. But Margaret had been gone 3 years now, cancer taking her just a year after Michael vanished, and I'd been alone in this cabin ever since, teaching myself how to live with ghosts. The knock at the door came so suddenly that I nearly dropped my glass. Nobody visited me out here. The road to the cabin was barely more than a logging trail, overgrown and treacherous in weather like this. I wasn't expecting anyone, hadn't expected anyone in months. I pushed myself up from the chair, my knees protesting the movement. 65 years old, and feeling every day of it. The knock came again, more insistent this time. Through the distorted glass of the door, I could make out a figure, tall and broad-shouldered, rain streaming off what looked like an expensive coat. My hand hesitated on the doorknob. For a moment, some irrational part of my brain whispered that it might be Michael, that he'd found his way home through the storm. But I'd learned to silence those thoughts. They led nowhere good. I opened the door. The man standing on my porch was not my son. But I knew that face, even though I hadn't seen it in 15 years. Robert, my younger brother. 2 years my junior and looking like he'd aged half that in the time since I'd last laid eyes on him. He was soaked through despite the Mercedes parked in my driveway, rain dripping from his gray hair onto my welcome mat. "Thomas," he said, and his voice was exactly as I remembered it. Steady, calm. The voice that had told me he was taking over Dad's construction business, that he'd bought out my share for pennies on the dollar while I'd been focused on teaching and raising Michael. The voice I'd told to never contact me again. "You've got some nerve," I said, already moving to close the door. His hand shot out, stopping it. "Get in the car, Thomas. I know where Michael is." The world tilted. Or maybe it was just me, swaying on my feet as those words rearranged everything I thought I knew about the universe. "What did you just say?" "Your son, Michael, he's alive." Robert's eyes met mine, and I saw something there I'd never associated with my brother before. Desperation, and if we don't move fast, he might not stay that way. I should have slammed the door in his face. Should have called it the cruel joke of a man I'd spent 15 years learning to hate. But something in his expression stopped me. Robert had always been a bastard, but he'd never been a liar. Not about the things that mattered. You have 60 seconds to explain yourself before I throw you off my property, I said. He glanced over his shoulder at the Mercedes, water sheeting off its dark paint. I'll explain in the car. We need to go now, Thomas. I've got proof, and I've got a location, but I've also got people who know I'm onto them. Every minute we waste is a minute they have to move him. Move him? Move him where? Robert, if this is some kind of sick. I've been working as a private investigator for the last 8 years, he said, speaking quickly now. Started after the divorce, after everything with the business went to hell. I've been looking into Michael's disappearance for 2 years. Not because you asked me to. I know you wouldn't. But because when I saw Claire on the news, collecting that life insurance payout, something didn't sit right. I started digging, and Thomas, I found things. Bad things. Things that prove Michael's death was staged. The rain seemed to get louder, drowning out my thoughts. Claire? Claire and her new husband, Victor Chen. I've got bank statements, offshore accounts, communications. Michael found out they were embezzling from his company. He was going to expose them, so they made him disappear. I gripped the door frame, my legs suddenly unsteady. The RCMP investigated. They found his equipment. They found what they were supposed to find. A ski pole. Some goggles. Easy enough to stage when you've got money and motivation. Robert stepped closer, rain plastering his shirt to his chest. Thomas, I know what I did to you 15 years ago. I know you hate me, and you've got every right to. But I've spent 2 years of my life on this because Michael is family, and I failed this family once. I'm not doing it again. So get in the goddamned car and let me show you what I've found. Or don't, and spend the rest of your life wondering if I was telling the truth. I stared at him, at this man who'd stolen from me, who'd torn our family apart over money and ego and pride. The man who'd missed Margaret's funeral, Michael's wedding, Sophie's birth. The man I'd sworn I'd never speak to again. If you're lying to me, I said quietly, if this is some con or some play for God knows what, I will make sure you regret it for whatever time we both have left on this earth. I'm not lying, Robert said. I swear on Mom's grave, Thomas. Michael is alive. I grabbed my coat from the hook by the door, didn't bother locking up behind me. If Robert was telling the truth, nothing else mattered. If he was lying, well, nothing else mattered then either. The Mercedes was warm inside, leather seats, and the smell of expensive cologne. Robert had done well for himself, apparently, even after the business collapsed. I remembered reading about it years ago in the Victoria Times Colonist. Lawsuits, bankruptcy. Robert's name dragged through the mud. Part of me had felt vindicated. Most of me had just felt tired. He pulled out of my driveway faster than was safe on the slick road, windshield wipers working overtime against the downpour. We drove in silence for the first few minutes. The only sound, the drum of rain and the hum of the engine. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. Talk, I said. Tell me everything. Robert kept his eyes on the road, both hands gripping the wheel. After the business went under, I hit bottom. Lost the house, lost my marriage, lost my self-respect. I was living in a shitty apartment in Surrey, working security jobs to make rent. One day I helped a woman track down her ex-husband who'd skipped out on child support. She paid me $200, and I realized I was good at finding people who didn't want to be found. So I took some online courses, got my PI license, started building a client base. I'm thrilled for your redemption arc, I said, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. Get to Michael. I'm getting there. He took a sharp turn onto the highway heading north, toward Nanaimo. 2 years ago, I was watching the news. They did a story on a charity gala in Vancouver. Claire was there with Victor, all dressed up, giving some speech about mental health awareness and coping with loss. She'd just received a massive life insurance payout from Michael's policy, $2 million. I'd known about the insurance. It had made me sick, watching Claire collect that money. But it was legal. Morbid, but legal. The thing is, Robert continued, I recognized Victor. Years ago, when I still had the business, I'd bid on a project for his development company. Never got it, but I remembered him. He was dirty even then. Rumors of kickbacks, bribes, offshore accounts. So I started looking into him. Just curiosity at first. And Thomas, the rabbit hole went deep. He reached into the center console and pulled out a thick manila envelope, tossed it into my lap. Open it. Inside were bank statements, printed emails, photographs. I held them up to the dim interior light, squinting to read. Accounts in the Cayman Islands. Wire transfers from MJT Technologies Michael's company to Shell Corporations in Panama. Dates going back 5 years. Victor had been embezzling from Michael's company since before they even met. Robert said. He used Claire to get access. They started an affair about 6 months before Michael's disappearance. She was head of finance. She had the keys to the kingdom. My hands were shaking. Michael would have noticed. He was meticulous about the books. He did notice. That's the problem. Robert pointed to one of the emails. Look at the date on that one. It was from Michael's company email address, dated 3 days before his disappearance. The subject line read, Audit discrepancies. Urgent. I scanned the message. Michael detailing irregularities in the accounts, demanding a meeting with Claire and the CFO, threatening to bring in external auditors. They killed him, I whispered. They killed my son over money. They tried to, Robert corrected. But here's the thing about making someone disappear in the mountains. It's hard to be certain they're actually dead without a body. And Claire and Victor needed to be certain, so instead of killing him, they did something else. He pulled out his phone, handed it to me. On the screen was a photograph of a man in a wheelchair, staring blankly at a television in what looked like a care facility, common room. The man had a beard, longer hair, was thinner than I remembered. But I'd have known that face anywhere. I'd seen it every day for 33 years before it vanished from my life. Michael, I breathed. The phone shook in my grip. Where is this? Where is he? A private care facility outside Kelowna. It's registered as a treatment center for brain injury patients. Michael is listed under the name David Foster, admitted 4 years ago after a hiking accident. No family, no visitors, bills paid by a trust administered by a law firm that, surprise, is connected to Victor Chen. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My son was alive. All this time, all the grief, the guilt, the endless nights, wondering if I could have done something different, said something different, been a better father, and he'd been alive, locked away. A prisoner. What did they do to him? My voice cracked. From what I've been able to piece together, they've been keeping him sedated, heavy doses of antipsychotics, benzodiazepines, enough to keep him docile, confused. The staff at the facility think he's a brain injury patient. They're not in on it, they're just doing their jobs. But whoever's prescribing his medication, whoever's managing his care, they're making sure he never becomes lucid enough to ask the right questions or try to escape. I looked at the photograph again, at my son, reduced to a shell. I'm going to kill them, I said flatly. Claire and Victor. I'm going to kill them both. No, you're not. Robert took back the phone, slipped it into his pocket. You're going to help me get Michael out of there, and then we're going to destroy them the right way. With evidence, with prosecutors and judges and prison cells. Margaret wouldn't want you to throw your life away on revenge. The mention of my wife's name hit like a slap. Don't you dare talk about Margaret. You didn't even come to her funeral. I know, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. Robert's jaw tightened. But right now, I need you to focus. We're about 3 hours from Kelowna. I've been watching the facility for the past week, learning the routines, identifying the weak points. Visiting hours end at 8 p.m. There's a shift change at 9. That's our window. Our window to what? Just walk in and demand they release him? They won't let us anywhere near him without authorization. Good thing I've spent 8 years learning how to get past authorization then. Robert smiled grimly. I've got fake credentials, a story about being Michael David's long-lost brother, finally tracked down through one of those DNA ancestry websites. I've even got forged documents from the trust administrator authorizing the visit. They'll let us in. And if they don't, then we'll figure something else out. But Thomas, we don't have time for a perfect plan. Victor's been getting nervous. I may have tipped my hand asking too many questions around town. If he decides Michael is too much of a liability, too much of a loose end. Robert didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I nodded slowly. my mind racing through 1,000 different scenarios, 1,000 different ways this could go wrong. What about Sophie? If Claire and Victor are arrested, what happens to her? She comes to you. You're her only family left besides Claire's parents, and they're both dead. You'd be her legal guardian. The thought of having Sophie back in my life, of being able to finally be the grandfather I'd wanted to be, should have filled me with joy. Instead, I just felt hollow. 4 years. They'd stolen 4 years from Michael and Sophie. From me and Michael. From all of us. Tell me what you need me to do, I said. We spent the rest of the drive planning. Robert walked me through every detail of the facility layout, the staff schedules, the security protocols. He'd done his homework. I had to give him that. Whatever else my brother was, he wasn't sloppy. As we crossed the Coquihalla Pass, the rain finally started to ease. By the time we reached Kelowna, the sky had cleared to reveal a field of stars. It felt wrong somehow, that the universe could be so beautiful on a night like this. The facility was on the outskirts of town, nestled in the hills, overlooking Okanagan Lake. It looked innocuous enough from the outside, a modern building with lots of windows, well-maintained grounds, the kind of place where wealthy families stashed their inconvenient relatives and paid premium prices for the discretion. Robert parked in the visitor lot, killed the engine. Remember, we're here to visit David Foster. You're my brother. We're emotional about finally finding our long-lost sibling. We want to help facilitate his recovery, explore care options, maybe even take him home if his condition permits. We're helpful. We're cooperative. We're not threats. And if Michael doesn't recognize us, if he's too far gone, then we get him out anyway and hope he recovers once we can get him proper care. Robert met my eyes. But Thomas, you need to prepare yourself. The man we're about to see might not be the son you remember. 4 years of what they've done to him, it leaves marks. I'd already seen the photograph. I thought I was prepared. I was wrong. The lobby was all warm woods and soft lighting, designed to make visitors feel like they were checking into a boutique hotel rather than institutionalizing a family member. A young woman at the desk greeted us with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Robert launched into his story with the ease of someone who'd told 1,000 lies for a living. He was David Foster's brother. I was their uncle. We'd been searching for David for years through ancestry DNA tests, and we were overjoyed to have finally found him. We had authorization from the trust administrator. He slid the forged documents across the desk. The receptionist examined them, typed something into her computer, frowned slightly. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. This was where it fell apart. Then she smiled again. Of course, Mr. Foster. Though I should mention that visiting hours end in 45 minutes. David should still be in the common room, but we'll need to keep this fairly brief tonight. You're welcome to return tomorrow during regular hours. We understand completely, Robert said smoothly. We're just so grateful for the opportunity to see him. We've waited so long. She led us down a hallway that smelled of industrial cleaner and overcooked vegetables. Through open doorways, I glimpsed other residents, elderly people slumped in wheelchairs, middle-aged men and women staring at nothing, the debris of lives interrupted by injury and illness. Margaret had spent her final weeks in a place not unlike this. I'd hated every minute of it. The common room was larger than I'd expected, filled with mismatched furniture and a television playing some nature documentary. Maybe a dozen residents were scattered around the space, some watching the screen, others lost in private worlds. And there, in a wheelchair by the window overlooking the darkening lake, was Michael, my son. He was thinner than in the photograph, his face gaunt beneath the beard they'd let grow. He wore sweatpants and a faded t-shirt, his feet in hospital slippers. His hands lay motionless in his lap, and his eyes, God, his eyes were empty. Watching that nature documentary like it held the secrets of the universe, but seeing nothing, I took a step toward him. Robert's hand on my arm stopped me. Slowly, he murmured. Remember, we're meeting him for the first time. Right. David Foster, not Michael Grant, not my son, just a stranger we were hoping to connect with. The receptionist had stayed back, giving us privacy. Robert approached Michael first, pulling up a chair beside the wheelchair. David? My name is Robert. This is Thomas. We're We're your brothers. We've been looking for you for a very long time. Michael's eyes drifted from the television to Robert's face, slow, like moving underwater. There was no recognition there, no spark of understanding, just a vague, chemical placidity that made my stomach turn. David? Robert tried again. Do you remember us? I don't. Michael's voice was slurred, thick. Don't remember anything. Before. Just here. Always been here. I couldn't help myself. I knelt down beside his wheelchair, took his hand in mine. It was limp, unresponsive. Michael, I whispered, too quiet for the receptionist to hear. It's Dad. I'm here. I've got you. For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. A ghost of recognition, there and gone so fast I might have imagined it. His fingers twitched in my grip. Dad, he breathed. Then his face contorted in confusion. No, I don't. They said I don't have a dad. They said I don't have anyone. They lied, son. They've been lying to you for 4 years. I was crying now, not caring who saw. But I'm going to get you out of here. I promise you. I'm taking you home. Thomas. Robert's voice was tight with warning. Someone's coming. I looked up. A man in a white coat was striding across the common room toward us, his expression thunderous. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the kind of perfectly styled hair that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. I'm Dr. Harrison, he said, not offering his hand. I'm David's attending physician. I wasn't informed we had visitors this evening. We have authorization from the trust administrator, Robert said, standing to face him. The receptionist verified our credentials. Did she? Dr. Harrison's eyes flicked between us, calculating. And you are? Robert Foster, David's brother. This is our Uncle Thomas. We've been searching for David for years through genealogy databases. The trust administrator was kind enough to facilitate this reunion. I see. And has the trust administrator also authorized you to discuss David's medical history? Because, from what I'm hearing, you're making some rather specific claims about his condition and care that go well beyond a simple family visit. I stood up slowly, keeping myself between this bastard and Michael. My nephew has been illegally detained in this facility for 4 years. He's been drugged into submission to keep him from remembering his real identity and his real family. And I'm betting when the authorities look into your prescribing practices, doctor, they're going to find some very interesting connections to Victor Chen and his wife. Dr. Harrison's face went pale, then red. That's an outrageous accusation. David Foster suffered a severe traumatic brain injury. He requires ongoing care and medication management. If you continue making these baseless claims, I'll have to ask security to escort you from the premises. Try it, I said. Go ahead. Call security. Call the RCMP while you're at it. I'm sure they'd love to hear about your patient David Foster, who doesn't have a single medical record predating his admission here 4 years ago. No previous doctors, no emergency room visits, no history of treatment anywhere else in the country. Almost like he materialized out of thin air. The doctor took a step back. I saw it then the moment he realized he was caught. His hand moved toward his pocket, toward his phone. Robert was faster. He grabbed Dr. Harrison's wrist, twisted it behind his back. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Doc. See, I've been recording this entire conversation, and I've already sent copies of all the evidence we've gathered. The bank statements, the emails, the photographs, everything to the RCMP, the BC Securities Commission, and 3 separate investigative journalists. So unless you want to add obstruction of justice to your list of charges, I suggest you cooperate. You're bluffing, Dr. Harrison said, but his voice shook. Am I? Robert pulled out his phone with his free hand, showed the doctor the screen. That's Detective Sarah Nguyen with the RCMP Major Crimes Unit. I've been working with her for 6 months. She's on her way here right now with a warrant for your arrest. You've got maybe 10 minutes before this place is swarming with cops. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back to your office. You're going to sit down, and you're going to wait quietly for the authorities to arrive. And if you do anything, and I mean anything, to interfere with us or harm David, I will make sure that in addition to everything else, you're charged with attempted murder. Are we clear? Dr. Harrison nodded jerkily. Robert released him, and he practically ran from the room. The receptionist had noticed the commotion and was heading our way, confusion evident on her face. Robert intercepted her. "There's been a situation with Dr. Harrison. The RCMP are on their way to investigate some irregularities in patient care. We need you to remain calm and ensure that none of the residents are disturbed. Can you do that?" She nodded, eyes wide. "Is he okay?" "David is going home," I said, already moving Michael's wheelchair toward the door. "For the first time in 4 years, my son is going home." We made it as far as the parking lot before the reality of what we'd just done hit me. I stood there in the cool evening air, one hand on Michael's wheelchair, and started to shake. We'd actually done it. We'd found him. We'd gotten him out. Michael looked up at me, still confused, still doped to his eyeballs on whatever cocktail they'd been feeding him. But he was here. He was alive. He was mine again. "Don't cry, Dad," he said, words still slurring together. "It's okay. I'm okay." "You're goddamned right you are," I managed. Police cars appeared on the horizon, lights flashing. Robert had been telling the truth about Detective Nguyen. Within minutes, the facility was surrounded. Nguyen herself, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, took our statements, while paramedics examined Michael, testing his pupil responses, his vital signs, documenting the chemical lobotomy he'd been subjected to. "We've got arrest warrants for Claire Chen, Victor Chen, and Dr. Ryan Harrison," she told us. "Vancouver PD is picking up the Chens now. Harrison's already in custody. You two did good work here, even if you bent about 17 different laws doing it." "I'll pay whatever fines you want to levy," I said. "Just promise me they'll go to prison. With the evidence your brother collected, they're going away for a long time. Fraud, embezzlement, kidnapping, false imprisonment, identity fraud. The Crown prosecutor is going to have a field day." They took Michael to Kelowna General Hospital, where a neurologist confirmed what we already suspected. Years of inappropriate antipsychotic medications had left him in a fog, but there was no brain damage. Given time and proper care, he should recover most, if not all, of his cognitive function. It was 3 a.m. when they finally let me see him. He was in a private room, hooked up to monitors, IV antibiotics, flushing his system of poison. But his eyes were clearer now, more present. When I walked in, he turned his head toward me and smiled. "Hey, Dad," he said, and his voice was his own again. "I've been trying to remember. Is Sophie okay? She must be so big now." I pulled a chair up beside his bed, took his hand. "She's 8 years old, and beautiful, and brilliant. And she's going to lose her mind when she sees you." I kept trying to hold on to her face, Michael said quietly. "Her name, but the drugs." Everything got fuzzy. Sometimes I'd surface enough to know something was wrong, that I wasn't supposed to be there, that I had to get out. But then they'd up my dosage, and I'd sink back under. "How long was I gone, Dad? How long did they have me?" 4 years. But you're safe now. They can't hurt you anymore." He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ceiling. "Claire, in custody. Victor, too. The RCMP have enough evidence to put them away for 20 years minimum." "She was my wife," Michael said, and his voice broke. "I loved her. I trusted her. And she tried to erase me. She took my daughter and tried to erase me from existence." I squeezed his hand. "I know, son. I know. How did you find me?" The police gave up. "You told me once that you'd spent everything trying to find me, but there was nothing. What changed?" "Robert found you," I admitted. "He's been working as a private investigator. He's the one who put it all together." Michael's eyebrows rose. "Uncle Robert? I thought you two weren't speaking." "We weren't. Hadn't in 15 years. I paused. "He showed up at my cabin tonight and told me to get in his car. Told me he knew where you were, and he was right. Where is he now?" "Giving his statement to the police. He recorded everything at the facility, all the evidence we need to nail Harrison and the Chens." Michael closed his eyes. "I need to see Sophie. I need to tell her I didn't abandon her, that I wanted to be there, that I would have been there if I could. You'll see her soon, tomorrow, if the doctors clear it. But Michael, She's going to need time. Claire told her you were dead. She's going to be confused and scared. And, I know. He opened his eyes again, tears streaming down his face. I know. But Dad, I've missed 4 years of her life. 4 years I can never get back. I need her to know I didn't choose to leave. I need her to know I love her. She knows, I said, even though I wasn't sure it was true. Deep down, she knows. Robert appeared in the doorway around dawn, looking exhausted but satisfied. He lingered there for a moment, uncertain, until Michael held out his hand. Uncle Robert, thank you. I don't even know. Thank you. Robert crossed the room, took Michael's hand in both of his own. I'm sorry I didn't find you sooner. I should have been looking from day one. I should have. You found me, Michael interrupted. That's what matters. You found me and you brought Dad and you got me out. That's what matters. Robert looked at me over Michael's bed, and something unspoken passed between us. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. Maybe the first step toward whatever came next. I'll give you two some time, Robert said, releasing Michael's hand. I've got to get back to Vancouver anyway. Make sure the prosecutor has everything she needs for the arraignment. Stay, I said. The word surprised me as much as it surprised him. Just for a bit. We've got a lot to figure out, and I think maybe we figure it out better if we figure it out together. Robert nodded slowly, pulled up a chair on the other side of Michael's bed, and for the first time in 15 years, the three of us sat together in the same room, breathing the same air, part of the same family again. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a miracle cure for all the pain and betrayal and wasted years, but it was a start. 2 weeks later, I brought Sophie to the hospital. She'd been staying with me on Vancouver Island since Claire's arrest, slowly adjusting to the truth about her father. Detective Nguyen had sent a family therapist to help her process everything, and I'd spent hours answering her questions as honestly as I could. She gripped my hand tight as we walked down the hospital corridor, her small face pale with nervousness. What if he doesn't remember me? She whispered. He remembers you, I assured her. He never stopped remembering you. Michael was sitting up in bed when we entered, stronger now after 2 weeks of detox and proper nutrition. The doctors said he'd make a full recovery, though the psychological scars would take longer to heal. When he saw Sophie, his whole face transformed. Hey, sweetheart, he said, his voice trembling. Sophie stared at him for a long moment. Then she dropped my hand and ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck. Daddy, she sobbed. Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. I stepped back out into the hallway, giving them privacy. Robert was there, had driven up from Vancouver to be present for the reunion. He stood beside me, both of us watching through the window as Michael held his daughter, both of them crying, both of them holding on like they'd never let go again. Hell of a thing, Robert said quietly. Yeah, I agreed. Hell of a thing. Claire and Victor Chen were denied bail. Their trial was set for the following year. Dr. Harrison cut a deal with the prosecutor, agreeing to testify against them in exchange for a reduced sentence. The facility was shut down pending investigation of its other residents and their care plans. Michael moved in with me and Sophie on Vancouver Island while he recovered. Some days were harder than others. He'd have nightmares, wake up confused about where he was, convinced for a terrifying moment that he was still trapped in that place. But slowly, gradually, he came back to himself, started smiling again, started laughing. Robert visited most weekends, driving up from Vancouver with groceries and takeout and a willingness to just be present. He taught Sophie how to fish off my dock, helped Michael sort through the legal maze of reclaiming his identity, his company, his life. And bit by bit, the 15 years of silence between us started to feel less like an insurmountable wall, and more like something we could maybe, eventually, move past. One evening, in late September, the four of us sat on my porch watching the sun set over the water. Sophie was curled up against Michael's side, half asleep, while Robert nursed a beer and I worked on my second whiskey of the night. I've been thinking, Michael said, about what I want to do, about what comes next. Take your time, I told him. There's no rush. No, I know. But Dad, I spent 4 years having my life stolen from me. I don't want to waste another minute. And what I've decided, is that I want to help people. Other people who've been wrongly committed, or whose families have hidden them away, or who've just fallen through the cracks. I want to use what happened to me to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. Robert leaned forward. I've got contacts in the PI world. People who specialize in missing persons, wrongful commitments. If you're serious about this, I could make some introductions. I'm serious, Michael said. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Sophie stirred against his side. Will you still have time for me? She asked sleepily. Michael kissed the top of her head. Sweetheart, I've got nothing but time for you. But yeah, I'll probably be working on this too. Is that okay? It's okay, she said. As long as you come home. Always, Michael promised. I'll always come home. I looked at my son, my granddaughter, my brother, my family broken and rebuilt, scarred but surviving. The storm clouds had passed, the rain had stopped, and for the first time in 4 years, I could see the horizon clearly again. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined back when this all started, back when I was sitting alone in that cabin, convinced I'd lost everything that mattered. But it was an ending that felt earned, real, true, and sometimes that's all you can ask for. Sometimes that's enough.